Okay, on notes 5-2, we're going to be multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Rational means a fraction, so we're going to be dealing with fractions. And in order to simplify these, what we're going to be doing is using our factoring skills to factor the tops, factor the bottoms, and then see if we can simplify from there. Okay, so that's what you're going to do on each problem. So you're going to look at the top, look at the bottom, and see if you can factor. Okay, so looking at number 1, first thing, look for the GCF. So notice they have a 2x squared. So you're going to be left with 4x minus 1. And then in the denominator, notice they have an x in common, so you're going to take an x out. And you're left with 4x minus 1. Okay, so once you've factored completely, then you're looking to see if anything will cancel, because anytime you're dividing a term by itself, it cancels out to a 1. Okay, so notice 4x minus 1 will cancel with 4x minus 1. Then we're left with 2x squared divided by x. When we're dividing and bases are the same, those x's, we're going to subtract the exponent, so that would just give us a 2x. Because there's 2 x's on top, there's 1 on bottom, so one of them cancels out. Okay, looking at number 2, notice on the top, they don't have a GCF. You have 4 terms, so we're going to do what we learned yesterday, grouping. We're going to group the first 2 together and find the GCF. That would be 2x squared. You're left with x minus 3. Bring over that plus, that middle sign. Those last two have 7 in common. You're left with x minus 3. So remember yesterday we talked about these two should match up, and they do. So that's one of the factors. And then your other one is 2x squared plus 7. So there's my top factor. Looking at your denominator, x squared minus 9, 2 terms. You're checking for either squares or cubes. That would be difference of squares. So that would be x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay, so we factor the top, we factor the bottom. Now we're looking to see if there's anything that cancels out. So notice the x minus 3's cancel. So on top you're going to be left with 2x squared plus 7 over x plus 3. Now you won't be able to cancel those x's out there because you're adding a 7 on the top and you're adding a 3 in the bottom. Okay, so that you're going to leave it in that form. That would be the simplest form. Okay, looking at 3, notice we're just adding another fraction in there. We're multiplying them. You're still going to do the same thing as you did on number 1 and number 2. You're going to factor the tops, factor the bottoms, and then we're going to see if we can simplify from there. So I'm looking at this first top. I'm going to add to negative 1, multiply to negative 6. So that would be negative 3 and positive 2. But we're having to use the swing method. So that would be 2x minus 3 and x plus 1. Denominator, they have an x in common, so you're left with x plus 1. The second numerator, the second top, they have 4x in common, so you're left with x plus 1. And then 2x minus 3, we actually can't factor that, so we're leaving it as 2x minus 3. Okay, so when you have multiple fractions, in order to cancel out, it can be on top and bottom or diagonally, but you can't go straight across and cancel them out. So notice I have an x plus 1 here. I can only cancel it out with the x plus 1 that's right below it. Okay, you can't cancel out all 3 of them because a term divided by itself. Okay, then I have a 2x minus 3 that I can cancel with this 2x minus 3. And then notice I have an x right here. I can cancel that out with that x with that 4. So that's going to give me 4 and then x plus 1. And you don't need to multiply that back together. Just leave it in factored form. Okay, looking at 4, we're doing the same thing. So factor your top, they have 4x in common. You're left with x minus 1. Denominator, sum is 2, product would be negative 3. So that would be x plus 3 and x minus 1. You don't have to use the swing method there because the coefficient of x squared is 1. Looking at the second fraction, sum is 1, product is negative 6, so that would be a positive 3 and a negative 2. And then the denominator, we just have a 4x. So we can't factor that. Alright, so notice I have a 4x, I have a 4x here. I have an x minus 1, and I have an x minus 1 right below it. I have an x plus 3 here, and I can cross it out with that other x plus 3. So on top, I'm left with x minus 2. Notice on bottom, we don't have anything left. So that would be our answer there. So you're having to use factoring in order to simplify your rational expression. Okay, 5 is different because we have a division sign there, okay? Anytime you're dealing with fractions and you're dividing, you need to flip the second and multiply, okay? I also call it keep, change, flip. So when you're dividing, you're going to keep the first the same, change your division to multiplication, and you're going to flip the second, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and start factoring because we're still doing it the same way that we were doing it on the front. So my sum is 4, product is 4, so that would be 2 and 2. And you have an x plus 3 on the bottom. I can't factor that. So I'm changing my division to multiplication, and then I'm flipping this here. So I'm going to put that over 1. When I flip it, I have 1 over x plus 2, and I can't factor x plus 2. So notice one of these x plus 2's will cancel. So on top, when you're multiplying the tops together, you're just left with x plus 2 on top. And then multiplying your denominators together, you're left with x plus 3. You cannot just cancel the x's out, okay? Because you're adding a 2 to that x and you're adding a 3 to that x. Those are not the same exact thing. You can't cancel them out. So that would be your answer there. All right, let's look at 6. So we're dividing. So anytime you're dividing with the fractions, you want to keep the first the same, change your division to multiplication, and flip the second. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start factoring. So my sum is negative 1, product is negative 6. So that would be a negative 3 and a positive 2. We're having to use the swing method. So that's 2x minus 3 and x plus 1. Your denominator, they have a 2 in common. You're left with x squared plus 4. We cannot factor x squared plus 4. We talked about yesterday, you cannot factor sum of squares, only difference of squares. Okay, so I'm changing that division to multiplication and I'm flipping it. That's what that F means. So make sure that you put your 2x to the 4th minus 32 on top. So that they're going to have a 2 in common. And then we have difference of squares. So we're going to have x squared plus 4 and an x squared minus 4. You're factoring completely, so notice you can go one more step with that one. So you should have a 2, an x squared plus 4, and then when you factor x squared minus 4, that's x plus 2, x minus 2. My denominator is now, my sum is 1, product is negative 12. So that would be x plus 4, x minus 3, and then we're having to use the swing method. So that would be x plus 2 and 2x minus 3. Okay, so now we need to look and see if we can cancel anything. We have a 2x minus 3 that I can cancel with this one. An x plus 1, I don't have one. I have a 2. I have an x squared plus 4. We have an x plus 2. Okay, so look at on top. On top we have an x plus 1 and an x minus 2. On bottom, notice we canceled everything out, so this would be my answer. Make sure not to multiply it back together. Alright, last one. So notice that we're dividing and multiplying. So when we're dividing, we want to keep, change, flip. I don't want to flip that last one though, because I'm not dividing that last fraction. Okay, so looking at this first fraction, my sum is 5. Product is 6. So that would be 3 and 2. And using the swing method, we get 2x plus 3 and x plus 1. The denominator there, sum is 7, product is 12. So that would be 4 and 3. Having to use the swing method. So that's x plus 2 and 2x plus 3. Alright, I'm changing my division to multiplication. I'm flipping the second fraction. So now I'm going to have x squared minus 4 on top. That's difference of squares. Be x plus 2, x minus 2. Denominator is now x cubed plus 1. That's sum of cubes. So on cubes, if you look at your flow chart, you're going to have 2 terms and then 3. The cube root of x cubed is x. We're using the same sign. Cube root of 1 is 1. And then we're squaring the x to get x squared. Opposite sign. We multiply the 1 and the x to get just x. And then the last term is always positive. We're squaring 1 to get 1. Notice that we have the same exact thing on the top there. We're not going to be able to factor that. You can look to see, but sum of negative 1, product of 1, you can't factor it. So I'm going to leave that top there. Notice the denominator, they have a 2 in common. You're left with x minus 2. Okay, so we have a 2x plus 3. We have an x plus 2. We have an x plus 1. We have an x squared minus x plus 1. We have an x minus 2. So look at the very top. Notice everything is canceled, but we have to put something on top since we have something on bottom. So there's nothing left. Anytime we're canceling things out, we know it equals 1. Any term divided by itself. If you look at the denominator, we have this 2 here. So our answer would be 1/2. So we are using factoring to simplify a rational expression.